Hey guys, it's Dr. May. How are you? So, as you probably know, I've done a whole lot of videos on DBT and other kinds of things that are related to borderline personality disorder, relationships, and stuff like that. So I wanted to do a video specifically on self-injury, which is one of the common features of borderline personality disorder. So if you want to develop more insight into that behavior, whether you self-injure yourself or you have a loved one who does, or if you're a clinician and you work with somebody who does, then that's what this video is going to be all about, okay? So let me get this up for you. All right, so I'm going to call this self-injury. Here we go. Coming? Why we do it and what can help, okay? So basically, this is going to go over a variety of reasons why people self-injure. And as you'll see, that there's a lot of different purposes it serves, or a lot of different needs that it meets. And it's almost considered like a desperate attempt to meet needs or to regulate emotions or to fulfill other kinds of purposes in our life, right? But what I'm also going to do is, as I discuss each of these different needs and purposes, I'm going to talk about alternative, healthier ways to meet those needs and cope in a skillful way, okay? So it's gonna kind of toggle back and forth, all right? But I wanna make sure that before we get into anything, that if you're somebody who self-injures or has a history of it, that you're very careful about whether this video is okay for you, okay? The last thing I wanna do is to trigger you into self-injuring again, okay? Or so if you feel like you're in a shaky state of mind or you're not really sure how you're gonna respond to this, then come back to it another time or shut it off at this point, okay? So please, I want to be educating and helpful, but not triggering, okay? But just so you know, I'm not going to go into great detail about the intricacies of self-injury and methods of doing it or things like that. I'm not going to show graphic photos of any kind, okay? But I will use the term self-injury. I will discuss significance of blood and scars and symbolically what those could mean for us, okay? So, but please, use your wise mind to decide if this is the right video for you, okay? All right, so that being said, I'm gonna move forward, okay? All right, so first thing is, I like to think back of a broader context for self-injury, right? So it's not something that was just invented, a couple of decades ago. This has been around in different forms in the animal kingdom and in the human species for a really long time, okay? And it's had different meanings for us, okay? So I want to kind of give some of those deeper historical, cultural kinds of meanings and see how that ties into how you feel about your own behavior if you're somebody who self-injures, okay? So let's start with the animal kingdom, okay? So there's actually something called zoochosis or zoochosis. I'm not exactly sure the proper pronunciation, but basically what happens is that self-injury can be found in animals who were in the zoo. And it's a reaction to being in captivity and being in an unnatural environment. And some of the symptoms are listed on that photograph I have on the left. But some of them include self-injury, okay? So when animals are under conditions of deprivation or loneliness, like let's say they're not with their normal family group or their normal, animal group, when they're under the stress of being watched by people, of being in a confined space, of not having, opportunities for hunting, let's say, that they would have in the wild, when they're abused by zookeepers, when they feel desperate, all those things are very stressful, right? And when they're really stressed out, they engage in some of the behaviors involved in zoochosis, okay? So those could include self-injury, such as biting themselves and picking up feathers and fur and things like that, okay? So think about how that almost relates to humans, right? When we're really stressed out, that could be a trigger for us for self-injury, right? But we didn't invent that. Like even animals would end up doing that, right? Or if their attachments are disrupted. Like sometimes they talked about, let's say an animal being moved from one zoo to another, just because let's say there's too many monkeys in this zoo and this other zoo down the road needs another monkey. So they're just separated randomly from their family. And being separated from their family and put in a new environment could create this kind of behavior, okay? So we have problems with connections that could also trigger the behavior, okay? So check this one out. So this isn't exactly self-injury, but it's very related, okay? There's a guy named Bruce Alexander who's from Canada, and in the 70s, he did research on substance abuse in animals, okay? So in one group, he had some rats in their normal kinds of cages, right? And all they had in the cage was 2 bottles of solution, and one had morphine in it, and one was just water. And they wanted to see, if given a choice, would the rats pick the drugs or would they pick the water? And when they're just in a plain boring cage by themselves, and not very stimulating, not very exciting, no social opportunities, they end up drinking a lot of the morphine and they get addicted, okay? However, when they were placed in what they called rat park, which is like paradise for rats. So they have toys, they have, places to run around, they have opportunities to socialize with other rats and date and mate and whatever rats do. They were much happier, right? And in that condition, they just preferred to have the water. They didn't need the drugs to feel better because all their environment was stimulating enough to make them feel better, right? So think about humans, right? So when we don't have our needs met and we feel bored or we feel empty or disconnected, much more likely to engage in addictive or compulsive type behaviors such as self-injury or substance abuse or some other target behavior. When we're much more interested and fulfilled, we're much less likely to do that, right? Kind of interesting, right? It kind of filters down from the animal kingdom. Okay, another thing, in a spiritual sense, now we're moving into humans, by the way. There's been a lot of instances of self-injury to try to move toward a spiritual connection, right? So they said some Hindus might pierce their bodies in different ways to gain favor with a god named Murugan, okay? In Christianity, there was a thing about mortification of the flesh. And so people would hurt themselves thinking like, if I destroy my sinful flesh, it'll reveal my spirit and I'll be much more connected to God, right? So it's kind of a mind-body split, but the idea was like, it's gonna purify me or bring me closer to, my connection with God, okay? They also say, even currently, there's some Shia Muslims, which might be a little more on the extreme side, who give themselves self-inflicted wounds, which they call takbir, on the last day of a holiday named Ashura. And it's to signify, I think, the murder of Muhammad's grandson or something to that effect. And so they reenact it by self-injuring, okay? But it's a spiritually significant act for them, okay? All right, in certain tribes, currently even in Africa and certain other places, self-injury or just injuring yourself or cutting, scarification, even knocking out teeth is part of an initiation ritual. So when people transition from one phase of life to another, such as from childhood to manhood, it's like a sign of endurance and strength that I can withstand this pain. And then I can go through these feats of strength and these different kinds of tests. And when I pass them, I'm now considered a man, right? So it helps with a transition, like an initiation rite, okay? Even think in a slightly different sense, like sometimes this self-injury happens around the time of adolescence, right? So it's part of that transition from childhood to adulthood for some people. Even like things like getting a piercing or getting a tattoo, which is not exactly self-injury, sometimes becomes like, a sign that I'm moving on to the next phase of my life, right? I'm 18, so I could get my belly button pierced or my nose pierced, or I get a tattoo now, right? So it's almost like a sign like I'm moving to the next phase, right? So kind of connected with this whole thing. Okay, whoops. In some cases, tattoos or scars are a sign, like a symbol based on what it is, how it's done, right? That can denote social status or standing, right? So let's say the people in the center are in a tribe and the type of tattoos they have kind of show what tribe they're on, right? So like if I was at a Mets game and I wore a Mets t-shirt, it would show what team I'm part of, right? It's kind of the same thing, but it's done more permanently. The person on the left has a special pattern of scars that denotes what tribe that person is in, right? And even on the right, the guy has tattoos on his chest that have to do with gang membership. So that's a little bit more of a current example, right? So certain types of self-injury or scarification or tattooing have to do with a sign of being in a certain group, okay? All right. There's another thing called reclamation. So in certain, like they call neo-tribalist or modern primitives cultures, they specifically use certain types of self-injury and, you know, these different types of piercings and things like that to reclaim their body, right? And they say it's a way of reclaiming it from religion, from God, from parents, from the government, from churches, from doctors, from other people that may have had some claim on their body. It's a way, now I'm going to do something to it and I'm going to make it my own. Okay. So another example in a slightly different context I heard recently is like, let's say if someone were to use like the word faggot, right? And someone was straight and called a gay person faggot, and it was very derogatory, you know? But let's say among certain people in the gay culture, they jokingly call each other faggots. So they reclaim the word and they use it as a kind of a bonding, a joking kind of a thing, right? So it's like they take something that was once harmful and make it their own, right? So if my body was abused in another way, but then I do something to it, I'm kind of reclaiming my body and make it my own, all right? So that's sort of the idea behind the modern primitives and some of the things that they do. All right, so actually I'll read below. So this guy, Fakir Musafar, was famous for that. He's the one in the picture. And he insisted that what he did to himself wasn't self-mutilation. Like it wasn't to do something bad to himself. It was for physical enhancement, right? A search for a state of grace, okay? So it was almost like there was an attempt to heal in some way, right? In certain S&M type cultures, I guess you could call it a culture, there's certain types of injury and blood play that are part of a sexual charge. So it's incorporated in their sexuality, okay? So it's serving that type of a purpose, like there's some kind of eroticism associated with it. Okay, in general, it was just think of significance behind blood, right? So when a woman gives birth to a baby, blood is shed, right? And when someone dies, especially in a violent way, blood is shed. When you're living, there's blood pumping and flowing through your body. It's a sign of the life force. So when self-injury takes place and there's blood that's let out or there's access to blood, it has to do with the life force and the death force, right? So there's some part of you that's reaffirming life and there's some part of you that's toying with the death wish, okay? So it has both of those things kind of mixed together. In some cultures and religions, bloodletting, which is like letting blood out, is thought to be a form of healing. So in, let's say the Islamic healers in Morocco, they felt like ingesting someone's blood or a healer's blood is considered to be medicine, okay? Whirling dervishes, you know, so those guys twirl around and it creates an ecstatic state, which brings them to a higher level of spirituality. Sometimes, maybe not always, but sometimes might self-injure and feed their blood to others to drive out evil spirits and to heal, okay? So they let it out to drive out the spirits. You ingest it from someone holy in order to have a medicine and healing, okay? In early medicine, there was a lot of bloodletting. So people were purposely made to bleed out to a degree, to let some of the poisons or the badness out of your body, okay? And even the term getting rid of bad blood, in a symbolic sense, could mean, you know, a sign of getting rid of ill will between us, right? We're going to get rid of the poison between us and we're going to create peace, right? So on some level, if you self-injure, it's almost like part of you is trying to heal, even in this way, right? Even if you never really thought of it, you might have some traces of this in there, right? So you're trying to get the poison out of you so that you could then heal, okay? Okay, so other spiritually meaningful blood sharing. So some ancient folks, so Olmecs, I don't know that one too well, Aztecs and Maya, those I do know a little bit better. So they anointed sacred idols, such as the one in that picture, and they anointed them with their own blood as a sign of devotion or penitence, right? So it was a way of connecting with the gods, right? And even Catholics, you know, they have the bread and the wine, right? And when they drink the wine, you're symbolically drinking the blood of Jesus, right? And it's a way of helping yourself take in the spirit of Jesus Christ, right? So it's a way of bringing spirituality into you, right? So more of holy meanings, right? All right, so let's move on to scars, all right? So in some ways, because scars are relatively permanent, although some can fade over time, but some can stay for a lifetime, they serve as almost like historical markers, right? So you could look at probably certain scars in your body and remember how I got that injury, or what was going on around that time when this happened, right? Whether it's a self-inflicted wound or something that happened from a different source, okay? And also, in certain cases, including for self-injury, they could serve almost as battle scars, especially if you're in recovery, right? So you might look at them and say, you know what, that was a time in my life that I survived. It was difficult, but it's a sign that I got through some tough times. Maybe that behavior at the time helped me get through those tough times. So it could be almost symbolic of a time of strength, courage, survival, and even transformation, okay? What I've found working with people too is that a lot of people have ambivalence about their scars, especially for these reasons. So while on one hand, you might be embarrassed about them or ashamed about them and want to hide them, such as with bracelets or long sleeves and things like that, part of you sometimes wants people to see them, right? Because it is a sign of who you are, and you don't want to be ashamed of who you are and cover them up, right? Because it can be a sign of a historical marker or a sense of strength, right? So people have those two mixed feelings about them, right? So the desire to hide, the desire to show. Sometimes you want people to see them, sometimes you don't want people to see them, right? So having mixed feelings about it is okay, right? And sometimes people worry a little bit when they start to fade. You know, it kind of creates some uncomfortable feelings. You know, it's not always 100% something that you want, even though on some level you want it, right? So just to validate yourself, that's kind of common. Okay, so I'm going to move to a new phase. So a little bit beyond the cultural significance and symbolic kind of stuff, to a little bit more of some more practical current reasons why people tend to self-injure, especially if you're in the borderline personality disorder category and so forth. Okay, so this section is going to go back and forth between why do we self-injure and how can those needs be met in other ways. So for each one, or close to each one, we're going to talk about the why of self-injury and then move on to other ways those needs can be met in a healthy, skillful way. Okay? All right. So one thing that people talk about sometimes is that, you know, when you're in emotional pain, it's like an invisible illness, right? When people say they have fibromyalgia or they have chronic fatigue syndrome, it's invisible. And people don't really believe how much you suffer sometimes, right? Because emotions and invisible illnesses aren't taken as seriously. And sometimes even within yourself, it might feel a little less than real when it's just on an emotional level. So sometimes there's a desire to make your emotional pain more concrete, something you could see, something that's more physical. So self-injury could serve that purpose. It helps to make this invisible emotional experience more concrete, tangible, and even controllable. Okay? Another thing it could serve is almost like emotional regulation. So if you're overwhelmed with your emotions, you might end up turning to self-injury as a way to decrease your intense emotions, okay? So it could help you escape them at times or reduce them or numb yourself in some way, even soothe painful feelings. Sometimes even they talk about, I've heard people say, for example, that let's say you're anticipating a situation where you're probably gonna have a hard time. Like I'm gonna have an encounter with somebody and it's probably gonna be painful. So you might have anticipatory anxiety, like you're anticipating, let's say, feeling anxious. And you might respond to that anticipatory anxiety with anticipatory self-injury. So you're almost trying to quell the feeling before it even happens. That's another version of that, okay? But sometimes it happens after the fact, after you're already flooded. Okay, so what skills could decrease intense feelings besides self-injury? Well, if you're a DBT person, any kind of distress tolerance skills could be really helpful. Emotion regulation skills for sure. Certainly look in the manual for this. I also have videos of all of these skills if you want more details. But these are definitely alternate, safer ways to manage your intense feelings. Okay, even mindfulness could be part of that too. But these are a little bit more proactive, I guess you could say, for these two. Okay, so another thing it could serve as a catharsis for intense feelings. So like that picture where the woman's kind of like letting it all out, sometimes we feel like our feelings are bottled up inside and we don't know how to express them. It's hard to figure out what to say. It's hard to figure out how to let them out. And so self-injury helps us with this catharsis. It helps us let it out, okay? Sometimes it literally bleeds out, okay? But there are alternative ways to do this, right? So sometimes it could be a release to talk about it. If there's someone you trust, such as a therapist or a friend or somebody you're close to, talking about the thing that triggered the self-injury could be a release for the feeling. Other times, exercise, could help a lot, like kind of physically helps you get it out of your system. Or even using the arts, okay? You could write about it in a journal, draw about your feelings. You could move, do dancing, play music, sing, something that will help you get it out, right? If you sing a sad song and you're feeling sad, it might be cathartic for you, right, for example, okay? So try to explore these things as alternatives. Okay, another thing is that sometimes the act and the preparation for the self-injury can create a sense of excitement, or almost like adrenaline rush, okay? So it becomes your own little roller coaster ride. And this is very similar to how addicts talk about substance abuse, right? Because, and even for eating disorder folks, right? So there's a sense of having to plan it, right? Having to get your, where to do it, how to do it, what you're gonna use, all that kind of stuff, anticipating how it's gonna feel once you do it, finally doing it, keeping it a secret, and all that kind of stuff, right? Covering it up afterwards, right? So there's a sense of this cycle happening that creates a sense of excitement, all right? And it might feel like something you have to keep familiar to you, because if you grew up in an abusive home, there probably was a lot of chaos. There probably was a lot of emotional charge, a lot of quote unquote excitement, maybe not a good excitement, but it was like, it had that kind of, constant drama going on, right? And so therefore, your nervous system might be used to that higher level of stimulation. And you don't feel right unless you're meeting that level of stimulation. So you might find all different kinds of ways to meet it. And self-injury could be one of them. It could also be recreating drama in your current relationships, or it could be other kinds of risky, impulsive behaviors, right? But there's other ways to create a sense of excitement that are healthy, right? So what can we do? Some people are adrenaline junkies, so to speak, and they participate in all kinds of fun adventure sports. Whitewater rafting could be one of them, rock climbing, sky jumping, bungee jumping, mountain biking, or all kinds of stuff, right? So maybe one of those things would feel fun for you, exciting, right? I also find it really exciting personally to travel to new places, right? That sense of novelty and being in a new place and seeing new people and new buildings and new scenery. It could be very exciting, right? Attending a concert, right? It could be a big rush of the excitement of the crowd and the music and the lights and all the stimulation. Or if you're an adrenaline junkie, you also might like amusement parks, right? Nothing like the rush of a roller coaster, right? All right, so these are just some alternatives you can try. Okay, other times, you may not have intense emotions. You might be dissociated from your emotions and feeling very disconnected and numb. And that itself could be distressing. It could be a very uncomfortable state to be in. And so self-injury can become a way to bring yourself out of that, right? And help yourself feel again, right? Maybe you feel emotionally dead, but now I physically feel something and it kind of wakes me up and brings me back, right? And the idea of wanting to feel that vitality and aliveness makes a lot of sense, okay? And it also might help you feel more focused and grounded. Like if you feel dissociated, sometimes it's very hard to focus. Your mind is kind of blank. You're a little scattered. You feel kind of fragmented. And so focusing your attention on that one act could kind of bring your attention back. It could kind of make you feel more integrated, more, whole, because you're all wrapped around that behavior, okay? But as with the other things, there's other ways to do this, okay? So one of the main things I recommend for dissociation is a grounding activity, right? So instead of grounding yourself with the pain of a self-injurious act, you could use your senses to bring yourself back to the room, all right? So they talk about the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 exercise. Not sure if you've heard of it. So look around the room, wherever you're at. 5 things you can see, and then name them, right? 4 things you can touch. Touching is super important. Getting your feet flat on the ground, gripping the sides of your chair, patting yourself, feeling your edges, okay? 3 things you can hear. Getting your ears activated, looking to the outside. 2 things you can smell. If there's not much smell in the room, you could always carry with you scented oils or some other kinds of strong scent that could bring you back, okay? And 1 thing you could taste. You could taste your own mouth if you want to, but you could also carry like certain kinds of strong sucking candies that could be kind of grounding for you, all right? So whatever seems to work. Dissociation is also part of an immobilized response to threat. Okay, so we have mobilized and immobilized responses, and this is related more to freeze. Like when you can't fight back and you can't run away, you tend to freeze, and dissociation is a freeze state. And when you're frozen, you're immobilized. Okay, so the idea is to move out of that by getting more mobilized, right? Particularly with exercise. If you can't do a formal exercise class or something, just walk, just do sit-ups, do jumping jacks, twist, whatever you have to do, get moving, all right, really important. There's also a DBT skill as part of distract with accepts, and the S at the end stands for with intense sensations. So as I was kind of hinting for the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, you could use any kind of intense sensation, including holding ice, to help snap you back from the dissociation. So instead of using the intense sensation of self-injury, which is harmful, use a safe, intense sensation, okay? Okay, another thing that sometimes happens is that you started out feeling kind of fragmented, or maybe you struggle with a dissociation, or your emotions shift so much that it's hard to feel like you have a strong core within you. You feel like I'm different across different situations and with different people, and I never know who I'm gonna be, or who I'm gonna feel like, right? So when you feel like that shaky sense of identity, it's easy to say, I'm going to form my identity around this behavior or around this diagnosis that I have, right? So I'm a cutter, or I'm a borderline, or I have complex PTSD, right? Or whatever it is that you might find a label for yourself. I'm an addict, and that becomes your strongest sense of identity. And it's better to feel something than nothing sometimes, because we don't like the uncertainty of feeling like I don't know who I am. Right? And that can be really kind of uncomfortable. But the problem is obviously, like, if you solidify your identity around the negative behavior, it makes it harder to give up that behavior, because now you're afraid of feeling nothing. You're afraid of losing yourself. Okay? And that could be a slippery slope, because it's bad for you, it's harmful to you, but if I give it up, I don't know who I'm going to be. All right? So how do we do that? All right. So mindfulness is one of the key skills here. Okay, so when you're mindful, you're tuning into yourself. You're tuning into your emotions, to your physical sensations. You're observing your thoughts. You're observing the parts within yourself. You're observing your surroundings. And in the course of that observation, you're realizing more about yourself. And you're also realizing that all the different things that I'm observing are changing. Right? My feelings are changing, my thoughts are changing, my body sensations are always in a state of constant change. So I can't hang my hat on any one of those things and say that's me. Okay? So one of the biggest questions in Buddhism is, who am I? Okay? And they run through all these different things. And in the end, the true you is the pure loving awareness that's observing all the other stuff. And that's your truest, highest self, your wise mind, as they'd say in DBT, and the truest identity that you have. And so when you get more solid in feeling that, that's a much healthier way to see yourself than any one thing that you could observe, including self-injury. Okay, so wrap your mind around that a little bit, okay, and put mindfulness into your practice if you haven't already. So it's super important. And if it's too hard for you to do mindfulness with your eyes closed, just like that lady in the picture, focusing on your breath because too many bad thoughts, for example, do it as a grounding practice. Observe something on the outside. This way you won't get it stuck in your head, okay? But start somewhere, really important. Okay, another reason why people self-injure, biochemical relief. So it actually shifts the chemistry in your body when you do it, and you end up feeling a little bit better, right? So that's why you get into the habit of doing it, because it's like getting a high, right? So if every time I take a hit of marijuana or cocaine or alcohol, I feel a little bit better, it's going to reinforce me for doing it again, right? Same thing with self-injury. So if every time I do it, I feel a little bit better on some level, it makes me want to do it again, okay? And the idea of wanting relief makes a lot of sense. I mean, who wants to suffer, right? But it's obviously not sustainable because you're physically hurting yourself, all right? So what kind of biochemicals get released? All right, so people who self-injure have a higher release of opiates and natural opiates, you know, the one that your body produces, and endorphins, okay? So these are like the feel-good chemicals, the same kind of thing that's in heroin, okay? But your body produces it and it's natural. And it also creates a sense of numbing and analgesia, sorry, I mumble a lot, which kind of creates pain relief. And in your brain, the parts for physical pain and emotional pain are right next to each other, right? So as it creates a relief from physical pain, there's also a little relief from emotional pain, all right? And makes sense, right? Who doesn't want to feel better? It also helps to reduce stress. And after people self-injure, it seems that their stress goes down, including their blood pressure and their heart rate, all right? So wanting to reduce stress also makes sense, right? But obviously, healthier ways to do this. So other ways to increase endorphins and reduce stress. These are just a few. Obviously, there are a lot. But exercising and meditation have been shown to do both of these things, okay? If you do this on a regular basis, even better. Laughter increases the endorphin release too, okay? So watch a funny movie, laugh with a friend. Laughing and connecting with people, even better, right? When we're with people, it reduces our stress response. Feeling connected is very helpful. Feeling isolated and lonely makes us much more likely to be under stress. Singing also releases endorphins and reduces stress, okay? And helping others. There's a helper's high they talk about, right? So when we help other people and in an altruistic kind of a way without expecting anything in return, it kind of makes us feel good, and it also helps us feel connected, which reduces our stress response, all right? Okay, so in this next section, I'm going to talk about how self-injury helps us replicate an abuse triangle that we may have experienced earlier in our life, or maybe even now too. Okay, so let's say you're growing up in your family and you're abused in some form by an older sibling or a parent, okay? And maybe there's also someone who comes around who helps you out, okay? So all three people who are in your outside life, right, are now playing out within you, okay? So we internalize the roles of other people and they become part of ourselves, right? So there's the persecutor, right? So this is the part of who is an outside person who's now within you that inflicts the harm or the pain, okay? So this is the one related to the fight response that wants to hurt you to maybe get rid of something bad, right? There's a victim, right? So when you were younger, you were obviously the victim of abuse, but you're victimizing yourself when you self-harm, right? So this is a recipient of self-harm. And also there's a part of you that becomes the caretaker that tends to the wounds, okay? It used to be someone on the outside who did it, but now it's somebody within you, okay? So you play out all three parts. And in a way, it kind of is almost to help you master this experience. Like if I play out the different parts now among myself, inside myself, I could help to like reintegrate this experience in a hopefully a better way. That's the intention. It doesn't always work that way, but that's sort of like why we would act that out. Okay, so let's break this down. Okay, but in general, sorry, before we get to the parts, doing this within ourselves can create a sense of control because you're playing all three parts. When it's played out by other people on the outside, they can be completely unpredictable. You don't know what they're going to do, right? So if you were abused, you may not have been in control of your pain and how the person hurt you or when they hurt you. But if you're self-injuring, you have much more control over that because you're the one inflicting it, experiencing it, and caretaking it, okay? And you feel like you're owning and reclaiming your body because you're the one who's doing it to yourself, okay? So remember we talked about reclaiming, like that guy with all this, you know, the stuff in him? Okay, so it almost kind of creates that and is designed in some way to help you take charge of your body, okay, even though in some ways you're losing control. All right, so now we're going to get to the three parts. Forgot about that slide. All right, so the self-persecutor. This is the one who is trying to do the self-punishment, okay? So the persecutor is punishing that little dunce in the corner. So there's an inner dunce that you don't like, and the persecutor is trying to punish it, okay? And the idea is, well, maybe if I just kill off that bad part of me, then I'll be healed, right? I'll get rid of the bad blood. I'll get rid of the bad part. I'll get rid of the shameful part, the evil part, whatever it is. And once I cut that out, maybe I'll be better. I'll be good. I'll be okay, right? But the problem is you can't get better by cutting out a part. You just have to heal it and reintegrate it. So it's not a sustainable solution. And you might start by doing a little bit of self-injury to do this goal, but it doesn't work. So you step it up and you do it a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more severe. And it's sort of like it gets more intense because you keep trying harder and harder to get rid of this badness, but you're still never satisfied that the badness is gone. Okay, so this is one of the things that perpetuates and increases the behavior. Okay, so next, related to that, okay, one of the reasons it might be trying to get rid of the bad is a sense of purification. Okay, just like spiritually purifying, people are trying to do that, like by flagellating themselves and trying to get rid of the flesh so that the spirit would emerge. There's a sense of like this inner persecutor trying to purify you of the bad. Okay, so that could be another angle as well. All right. Okay, so then obviously you're also the victim because you're experiencing the hurt. There's part of you that's hurting you and part of you that is feeling the hurt, that's being hurt. Okay. So it's almost an attempt to master this experience of being a victim because you're doing it to yourself. And then the rescuer. So once the wound is there, now you have to take care of it, right? You have to bandage it, you have to stitch it, you got to do whatever you got to do. And you got to watch, you're watching it heal, right? So there's part of you that is involved in the healing after effect, okay? And wanting to help yourself heal makes a lot of sense, but obviously there's healthier ways to do that, right? Okay, so major skills for this triangle, okay? As I've said in other videos, the way to heal them is by caring for our parts, okay? The victim, the abuser, the passive bystander, the rescuer, all those different parts. So we have to accept them as part of ourselves, that they're all serving a purpose for us, that we need to listen to what their needs are, listen to what they're trying to do for us, right? So for example, the persecutor is trying to help us purify in some way, right? The victim is just trying to survive. The rescuer is trying to help us, right? So try to take care of their needs in a different way and show them compassion and understanding, right? They're suffering too. Think of them like suffering children that you need to take care of, okay? And that's the main way to heal, okay? Not by cutting them out. Another thing is, instead of caretaking by making a wound and then healing it, there's other more healthy ways to caretake ourselves, right? And this is a super important part of our healing in general, whether or not you self-injure. You know, if you're in recovery from anything, personal caretaking is really, should be at the top of your list, okay? Especially if you're suffering. I have a video called The Ultimate Self-Care Package, which you might benefit from watching. And it goes over all different types of ways we could caretake ourselves, including self-validation, right? Showing ourselves why our behavior makes sense. And this video is going to help you do that with self-injury specifically. Self-acceptance, accepting the different parts of yourself, right? And accepting that they are who they are. Self-compassion, being with yourself in your time of suffering instead of abandoning yourself. Self-forgiveness, right? Instead of hating the parts and wanting to get rid of them, forgiving them for not being who you wanted them to be. Forgive them for not being able to protect you the way you want to be protected. Forgive them for hurting you, okay? Positive self-talk, right? Sometimes part of the self-injury starts out verbally because we verbally abuse ourselves. So we got to switch that around and take care of ourselves with more encouraging self-talk, like we were talking to a friend, okay? Self-soothing, including the DBT self-soothe with the 6 senses, okay? So take care of our senses in a much gentler way, all right? And self-nourishing activities. So get involved in doing positive things, and it helps you feel better about yourself, okay? Next, another thing to keep in mind is that the behavior of self-injury is we have a relationship with it, right? Most commonly, we think of having a relationship with other people, right? We could also have a relationship with ourself and the parts of ourself. But we also have relationships with our behaviors. Okay, so this might be a little bit of a new concept, but it's actually true. And I always love this book. There's a book called Drinking a Love Story by Caroline Knapp. And I read it a few years ago. And she talks about, in almost like a romantic kind of a way, the way she felt about alcohol and her eating disorder, right? So this relationship that she felt to those behaviors, okay? Also is captured in the meme here that says, my first love was food, right? There's a relationship that we have to food. There's a picture here of a guy holding hands with a smartphone, perhaps on a date, because we have a relationship with our phones, a relationship with technology, okay? And on the bottom, you know, the girl says, help, my friend is cutting, right? So we have a relationship with self-injury, okay? And what happens is with these behaviors is it kind of creates a sense of simplicity and reduces the complexity and the confusion of real life relationships, right? So you might have found that in real life, relationships are complicated, right? People could betray you, they could abuse you. Sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not. They could abandon you. They could be mean to you. Other times they're nice. It's unpredictable. And so how do I create predictability when people are unpredictable? By connecting to a behavior that's very predictable. I know exactly how it's going to go. I know exactly how it's going to feel when I take that next drink or hurt myself or go on the internet and start surfing in social media, right? Those simplify life a lot. And the idea of wanting to feel a little bit more comfortable in control and simplified makes sense, but it becomes like an addiction, okay? And it's not a healthy relationship, okay? The idea is to be able to tolerate the complexity of real relationships, build better relationship skills, and then you can participate in true connections that we really need, okay? These are just pretty much like substitutes, right? Okay, another thing that you might be reenacting with self-injury is a fusion of love and pain, okay? So if you grew up in a family where love was mixed with pain, right? This might make a lot of sense to you, okay? So the same people who loved you were the same people who hurt you, perhaps, right? So they say, I love you one day, and then they smack you around another day, or they criticize you another day, right? And so in your mind, it might all be mixed together. One of the quotes I found was, the reason they are causing me pain is because they love me. Ever have someone hit you and they say, I'm doing this for your own good, or punish you and say, I'm doing this for your own good, right? Therefore, if I want to feel loved, I better create pain. So how do I create self-love if love and pain are mixed? I might create pain, and it's a twisted way of loving myself, okay? Especially if I have to caretake afterwards, right? So think about how this might symbolically make sense for you. So self-injury could be a way to communicate pain. It could be, you might have been through a lot of abuse and trauma in the past. And when you're doing that self-injury, you're reenacting it within yourself. And so other people, if they see it, it's almost like kind of showing them, look what I've been through. I've been through abuse, I've been through trauma, I've been through pain. Like, can you see how much I'm suffering? I don't even have the words to express it, all the things I've been through. But this could actually show it to you in some way, you know? Other times, you might be angry to somebody. It might be someone that you really want to tell off, or you really want to hit them or strangle them or something like that, but you know that you can't do it. Number one, you might get in trouble. Number two, you might wreck a relationship that you still kind of need. Or number three, the person might really hurt you back and retaliate, so you just can't. And so the anger feels like it has nowhere to go. And so you might want to communicate directly to them, but instead you communicate it to them by hurting yourself. So it gets turned back inside you. But when you're hurting yourself, you're really intending to hurt them. And it's sort of like a twisted form of communication. Okay, another thing that happens is that self-injury could be designed to help bring people close. This may not be your major intention. I know a lot of the things that people hate to hear is you're doing this for attention. Okay, and I'm not saying that. Obviously, there's many complex reasons why people self-injure, right? But one of the things that can happen is it becomes an invitation for people to become your caretaker or your rescuer or your support. Because now that they see that you're hurt physically, they try to come to help you, okay? And if it's not a supportive person in your life emotionally, It could be the doctor that's stitching you up, for example, okay, or some other more peripheral person. But you know, it's sort of like an invitation for people to come. And the desire to have people close and to help us makes a lot of sense, right? Obviously, there's other ways to get that to happen, but you know, symbolically, this could create this effect. Okay, another version of this is we all have a need for belonging, right? And if I'm not sure where I belong and I'm not sure who I am, I might find that I could find something in common with this kind of counterculture of people who self-injure. I might find them on the internet, and we all have this in common. And by doing it, I feel like I'm connected to them in some way because we're all doing the same thing together. Okay, so that could be another way of feeling closer to other people by uniting in a destructive behavior. Okay, another thing that happens though is that it pushes people away. And sometimes it's hard to set a boundary, right? We want people to come in, but then it becomes too much and we need to push people away. So how does this push people away? Well, it partly goes along with the wounds and the scars again, because if people see them, they could be a little freaked out by it. They could kind of move away because they're a little scared by it, a little intimidated, right? Relatedly, let's say piercings or very tattooed people look a little, you know, intimidating, right? And it kind of creates a buffer between them and other people, right? Or if people could get past the appearance of that, then I know they passed the test and that they really love me, okay? Other times it pushes people away because of your own shame. You know, you might be ashamed of your behavior and it's hard to let people in because you don't really want them to know about it, right? So it's that, geez, like if they get too close to me, they're going to find out that I hurt myself or they're going to see my scars, right? In a romantic relationship, it might be an excuse not to get too intimate with somebody, right? Maybe you were sexually abused in the past or you have real issues with intimacy. And so it's easier to say, you know what, I can't really get too close to somebody I'm dating because I really can't have them see my scars. It makes me look too ugly, right? So then it becomes an easy out for you to push people away and not have to deal with the complexity of a romantic relationship, okay? And also in your mind, on some level, you know, because this came from past trauma perhaps, it might be symbolically a way to push away abusive people, right? Create some kind of a buffer. Even people with eating disorders do this. Like if I'm too skinny and I don't look like a woman, no one's going to be attracted to me. Or if I'm really obese, it becomes this layer of protection and no one's going to want to get too close to me, okay? All right, so skills. So all those related to relationship skills. So what you have to, I mean, relationship issues, right? And how symbolically, you know, there's relationship implications for self-injury. So the thing to do is to really learn your interpersonal effectiveness skills. So the ones I listed here are from DBT, okay? But obviously there's a lot of different stuff out there. Dear Man from DBT is an acronym which is about assertive asking and making requests, expressing your needs, and improving communication, okay? So instead of communicating symbolically through self-injury, it would teach you how to verbalize your needs more clearly and directly, okay? The Give skill is about developing healthier relationships. So instead of, let's say, seeing a relationship as a fusion of love and pain, or bringing all your baggage from abusive relationships from the past, it teaches you how to relate to people in a healthier way. Okay, the Fast skill is about self-respect effectiveness, right? So when I respect myself, I'm not going to hurt myself. That's really important. But also it depends on, it impacts the boundaries that I set, because when I respect myself, I don't always let bad people in. I know when to say no. I know when to stick to my values and when to act from them and maybe disappoint people in order to do what's right for myself. Okay, so that's really important as well. So definitely look into these. It certainly could help in that process. Okay, so just wanted to share a few resources. So these are three of the main books that I use to put this presentation together, although I've worked with people with self-injury and, you know, for a really long time and learned directly from people. One is called A Bright Red Scream by Marilee Strong, Women Who Hurt Themselves by Dusty Miller, and Cutting by Stephen Levenkron. So any of those would be also good resources just to learn more about the symbolic nature of self-injury and to kind of help you build insight into yourself or people that you know, okay? And at the bottom, of course, I put DBT just as a reminder that DBT skills are really helpful for any form of self-injury. Okay, so I hope this was helpful and not too triggering. If you do feel triggered and didn't think you were, please use your skills or reach out to somebody. The idea is not to give you more ideas about how to hurt yourself or to re-stimulate this behavior, okay? But I do hope that it gives you extra insight and helps you to figure out other ways to meet your needs besides self-injury. All right, well, thanks for listening, guys, and I'll see you soon. All right, bye for now.